If you missed the Wisconsin legislature's resolution honoring Black History Month, you're not the only one. Republican legislators refused to move a vote on the resolution forward unless the names of the African Americans being honored were pre-approved by the GOP and deemed uncontroversial. And it's not the first time this has happened. We are joined by Wisconsin State Senator Dora Drake, who is president of the Black Caucus, the legislative group that brought the Wisconsin Black History Month resolution forward. Thank you so much for being with us, Senator Drake.
Thank you for having me again. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Can you help us understand why this is happening? Why is the GOP refusing to recognize Black History Month?
So, to be frank with you, this is an issue that has happened in years past. Over the last recent years, we were able to pass a bipartisan resolution honoring names. But the reality is, as Black legislators, whenever we want to honor people that we believe have made a historic impact in Wisconsin, we are always held to a double standard of who the Republicans would be able to approve in their own caucus to get on the floor. And this is nothing new. They don't do this with other pieces of resolution that come to the floor. And, just this past year, the Republicans put a resolution honoring Charlie Kirk, who had no ties to Wisconsin or, said disparaging things when it came to the impact that Black Wisconsinites and just Black folks in general have benefited from, whether it's been their impact on civil rights and so much more. And so, frankly, to tell you the truth, this is nothing more than Republican-controlled legislator fine-tuning and going through a tooth comb what names they want to approve for Black History Month, which is simply a disgrace. In a time when nationally we are actively seeing efforts to remove the celebrations, the impact, and the struggles that Black Wisconsinites and the whole country has gone through, this is something that, frankly, dishonors our very history, and as legislators telling us how we should celebrate Black history this year.
I want to go back to something you mentioned before.
Mm-hmm.
This is not the first time
No.
this has happened. What are some of the circumstances in past years where they've either wanted to modify the names, delete the names?
So really, the only dynamic that is truly at front and center is the Republican caucus has to be okay with those names, meaning that as legislators, members of the Legislative Black Caucus are continuously fighting or we have to make questions to negotiate if those are names that we want to push forward or not. And frankly, given what's happening nationally, we aren't doing that anymore. We're not negotiating who we want to honor. We're not negotiating on the Black individuals that we should honor just because you're uncomfortable with the names. And I think it's imperative that the Assembly had an opportunity to do this. They said they wouldn't be back in session, and so for them to say that unless do the names that we approve, then there's no Black History Month resolution, that's on their end. We have done our part. We are elected to represent our constituents and to honor Black History Month as we see fit and the contributions that Black Wisconsinites have made. And frankly, it's a disgrace that they would do it during this month.
Do they ever tell you which names they don't want to see on the list of African Americans who have made significant contributions to the history of our state and who've helped to shape our state? Who are some of the folks they just didn't want to see honored?
So sometimes they do. Sometimes it's really a couple, without getting into details about I don't know what's exactly happened in the assembly, making sure that these are names that they don't feel like are controversial or said things that they were upset with. And so because of that, that's why members of our caucus were just frustrated because the reality is they honored people all the time that have had very stark political differences, regardless of what they said, with flying colors, without any regard. But at least they allowed it to come to the floor to have a debate. So my thing is, if there are individuals that people question that, have issues with, they don't do it behind closed doors. Do it out in the open and the public because that's our job to discuss and debate those things.
So this is all happening behind closed doors where they are having discussions amongst themselves
Hmm.
about who might be too controversial, but they're not bringing that back to the caucus and they're not discussing it in the open. Why is that?
I would say you should ask them. I don't know why Republicans are afraid to have a conversation publicly about the very names that we should honor. I don't know why Republicans refuse to put efforts to uplift the accomplishments that Black Wisconsinites have achieved, not just, in Wisconsin, but throughout history. And we were intentional as a caucus, making sure that they had ties to Wisconsin and that, they're no longer with us, so we can honor the work that they've done over the years. I couldn't answer that for you. I think that's a question for them to answer.
Do you see this as part of a bigger effort that we see the GOP engaged in, where we're seeing how history there's an effort to reshape, erase, or shift history?
I think there is. We have seen nationally efforts to remove landmarks, regarding the impacts and the shortcomings of this country when it comes to African Americans across this country. We've seen the erasure of certain names, of their contributions, some from the 688, and with Anna Mae Robertson being one of those individuals, having her name removed off one of the federal establishments that we have in our country. This is nothing more than the Wisconsin Republicans, GOP, being influenced and guided by what the Trump administration is pushing forth. And frankly, I think it is a time where collectively we need to be um, resilient as well as um, solid in what we will push for, and acknowledging that you don't get to erase our history just because you dislike it. African American history is part of American history in all facets. And if we're truly going to embrace history as a whole, you need to embrace the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know what that comes with it, regardless if you like the names or not. That's part of the history, and we can't erase that just for your own comfort.
You also mentioned that the Black Caucus is just drawn a line and said, we're not going to do this anymore. So, what can the caucus do with the majority that the GOP currently has in both houses? What can the caucus do to work to make sure that Black History Month and individuals who help to make that history are recognized in the future?
I think it's the work that the caucus has continued to do. Throughout this month, members of the Legislative Black Caucus has had different events in the community or virtually highlighting the issues that impact Black Wisconsinites specifically. We have a Black Advocacy Day that is partnering with local community members, partners, organizations, and making sure that people have a chance to come to our state capitol and share what those issues are and sharing with our other colleagues why it's important that those issues are pushed at the legislator. And I think most importantly, I know myself and Rep. Stubbs, we introduced a piece of legislation, the African American History Bill Act, where we would make, our schools teach specifically African American history on the policy side. But collectively, I think this is more than just members of the Legislative Black Caucus, but this is a call to action to everybody. There's always ways where we can uplift our history. Black history is not something just to be celebrated. In the month of February, we celebrate it, but we recognize the impact year round. And so, as we move forward with very disappointing news from the response of the Assembly GOP leaders, there is still an opportunity, to push this forward, whether it's highlighting the people that we choose to honor in our own respective ways in the district, whether it's making sure that we do what we need to have representation at the state level that recognizes and honors our history without strings attached, are some of the things that we will continue to fight for.
Senator Drake, thank you so much for being here with us and explaining this situation. Please keep us informed on your efforts to make sure that all of Wisconsin's history is recognized.
Thank you so much, and absolutely I will.
That is our show for this week. Thanks for joining us. We are back again next week. Be well and take care.